Okay, good morning, afternoon, whatever it is. Sorry the video is a little bit late. Before we get started here today, I had everybody do a little warm up here. So the question or the task here is to write every name that can be used to describe each shape below and to make sure you're not assuming anything that is not given. That's the hard part here. So pause the video, think about what each shape could be called. There's more than one answer for each one of those, and then come back once you're done. Okay, so first one. The most specific name you could call this one would be a rectangle, and you know that because you've got these four congruent right angles in the corners. Now, because it is a rectangle, it also has to be a parallelogram, because a rectangle is just a type of parallelogram. It's also a quadrilateral. It's also a polygon. If you didn't think about the word polygon, I understand, but it is a rectangle, and so by default, it has to be a polygon, a quadrilateral, and a parallelogram as well. Number two just has these parallel sides marked, and so that automatically makes it a parallelogram, which means it is a quadrilateral and it is a polygon. And there's nothing else we can call this thing for sure because we don't know anything about the angles or the lengths of the sides, which is what would help us out with anything else. Number three is a kite because it's got equal pairs of sides there. That means it's also a rectangle, or not a rectangle, quadrilateral and a polygon. This one down here is a quadrilateral and a polygon. It's got no marks, so we can't assume anything. And this last one's a little bit trickier, but it is a parallelogram, it is a quadrilateral, and it is a polygon. The way you can officially tell about this is that if we've got four angles that add up to 180, and they're in pairs of equal angles, then one of each type has to add up to 180, and that means that these lines are parallel. And that means that one of each type of these adds up to 180, and so these lines are parallel using your parallel line conjectures. Okay, so the next thing we did was we took a look at this problem, and the question in this problem was, which fire hydrant should they turn on? Now, the main thing out of this is not which one is right, but how you came about that answer. If you started at this end and traced them all out, there's a pretty good chance that the first one you picked, A, was super long, and B wasn't the right one. So the strategy here was not to start at the fire hydrants and trace to see which one came here. It was to start here and trace your way backwards to see which fire hydrant it connected to. And so the moral of the story, it's like a little fable here, is sometimes in a proof, which is what we're going to be talking about today, you start off in a place where you have multiple different options and you don't know which one's right. By starting at the end and looking at the goal, you have the advantage of knowing where you want to end up, and that helps you with which of those options you want to start out with. So we're going to be starting with that. We're talking about that today. Now, today we did just two proofs in class, and this first one is kind of on the simpler side, and the second one is one that requires us to use that thinking backwards idea. Now, one of the biggest things we talked about with all of these proofs is this idea that even though we're talking about polygons and quadrilaterals specifically, it's still all about the triangles. So find the triangles that are congruent, prove that those triangles are congruent, and then the CPCTC is going to help you with the things that you need to know to keep going. It's still that same basic, find the three things, prove the triangles are congruent, use CPCTC that you've been doing the whole time. So in something like this, there's only two triangles in this whole picture. So it's going to be fairly obvious which triangles we have to prove are congruent. And then we have to start by figuring out which things can help us prove that those triangles are congruent. And so here we've got some givens. So it'd be a great idea to start with our givens.